Welcome to Conversation Mill. Join me as I talk to individuals stepping out to pursue their passions, from small business owners to community leaders, and learn with me how we can work together to support our local communities and local economies. Visit conversationmill.com to learn more, but now please join us in conversation. Fishery Pointe Cottages is perfectly placed, steps away from Lake Michigan. Though its address is Escanaba, Michigan, it is just up the road from Ford River. Fishery Pointe Cottages sits on a stretch of beach just south of the entrance to Little Bay de Noc in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, or as members of my family call it, God's country. I tend to believe them since the members of our families continue to live well into their 90s. I think it's the cryogenic effect that a lifetime of single-digit winters brings, but it would be short-sighted to only think of this area as a frozen lake and forest. Michigan's tourist slogan of Pure Michigan perfectly and succinctly conveys the experience of spending summers out on the bay, watching the sun go down as you race home to beat the darkness to the dock, or the crisp fall mornings walking to see the first leaves change. The air is cleaner, the water purer, the pace calmer, the scent of the woods smells better than any evergreen candle you've purchased, and the people hospitable, and excited to show you what makes the Upper Peninsula of Michigan its own unique state. And Fishery Pointe Cottages owners Eric and Amy Anderson embody this UP spirit and hospitality, creating an individualized experience for their guests. I always enjoy my time in conversations with Eric and Amy. Amy is one of my many cousins. Our shared grandmother had 10 children, 8 girls and 2 boys, and we are the offspring of 2 of these 8 sisters. But we also share the experience of living a large portion of our life in Wisconsin, and I ask Amy and Eric what it's like to come home again. Not only will you get a glimpse of the things that make the UP a place to come and spend your summers, or a place to go ice climbing in the winter, but also you will experience the heart that Eric and Amy have for people. And by experiencing that, get a peek into the heart of my family and of the many families that call this corner of the world home. Please join us now in conversation. Can you describe where we are today? And what I mean by that is the geographical setting where Fishery Pointe Cottages is located.
So Fishery Pointe Cottages is located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, just south of Escanaba, little area called Ford River.
And we're sitting in your kitchen, and I can look behind me and look right out on Lake Michigan.
Yeah, if I'm looking over your shoulder, it's because a boat just drove by and I'm paying attention to that. So.
I love that. What's the history of Fishery Pointe Cottages?
So Fishery Pointe Cottages, maybe even to back up to the intro, I grew up 300 yards down the highway. So I've known Fishery Pointe Cottages actually before it was Fishery Pointe Cottages. So when I was 4 years old, we moved to Ford River. At that point in time, it was Simpson's Cottages. In 1983, John and Irene Fisher bought Simpson's Cottages and renamed it to Fishery Pointe Cottages in 1983. So I've known the Fishers because John Fisher was a good friend of my father's. So I've known them my entire life. When I was in high school, actually, I worked around a resort a little bit, just doing odd jobs, helping John out with things that maybe he didn't want to do, or, just an extra pair of hands. Hey, can you rake this up? Can you do this? I did a lot of carpentry work at that time, so helped him out with a few things around the resort here.
So this is completely full circle for you.
Absolutely.
Since you did do some work here when you were in high school, what's it like coming back here now and being the owner of Fishery Pointe Cottage?
Bit surreal.
Yeah.
Amy and I feel extremely blessed to have this opportunity to come back home. All our families back here, and to have this opportunity was really, amazing. And this is My sister, I have a younger sister. This was her first job, was cleaning cabins here. So this has been part of, my upbringing and growing up in the area. In 2003, when John and Irene Fisher had decided that they were going to split the resort because they still live right next door. Okay. They kept 2 cabins, sold this house and the 5 cabins. They actually moved a cabin out that was right in front of our house. And in 2003, when they decided to do that, Amy and I discussed purchasing it then. However, at that point in time, I had just taken a new job. We had just had our second child. Financially, it was a big pill to swallow, right? We felt that we would have kind of stretched ourselves a little bit past our comfort level. And also starting a new job down in Appleton, Wisconsin, it would have been tough. So we decided at that time.
And having 2 little kids.
Yeah.
And having to run the resort would have been a lot of work.
It would have been a lot of work. But at times, over the course of that, from 2003 till the present, we've talked about it multiple times. It'd have been really cool to raise our kids on the beach here. It's a beautiful sand beach. It would have been awesome to see them grow up here. But at that time, it was just a little bit too much. And we talked about it a number of times. And then when the opportunity came about, this time, it's like, whatever we need to do to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Can you guys each talk about your experiences growing up here in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan? It's almost kind of like a regional thing that we know about, where you go to other places in the country and say the UP, they might not know what you're talking about, or you say Upers and they might know what you're talking about, but probably they don't, and you have to explain it.
I grew up in Gladstone, just about 10 miles down the road, and I would say, from when I can remember being little, in the summers especially, going to the beach with my mom and my aunts and my cousins every single day. And, moving to Wisconsin and hearing people talk about the lakes there, the inland lakes, I would always say, you have no idea about a lake until you're on Lake Michigan and grew up with it in your backyard, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's just small and quaint and not the hustle and bustle even of Appleton, Wisconsin.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I guess, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question, the UP, it's almost like a little bit of a throwback in time. It's small communities, pretty family oriented. In where we are in the UP, I mean, you're kind of surrounded by Great Lakes, right? You have Lake Superior to the north. Obviously we're right on Lake Michigan here. If you enjoy the outdoors, the UP is a great place to grow up. So I grew up in a family that hunted, fished. As kids growing up here, we'd jump on a 3-wheeler or a snowmobile in the wintertime, and you could go anywhere. So enjoying those outdoor, activities was a huge part of my life growing up. So that small community, really, kind of focuses around the outdoors and the Great Lakes that we have right in our backyard. So
I was just talking with a friend last night about growing up in the country and in an old farmhouse, and the things that make you resilient that a lot of people either don't get to experience or maybe isn't as common now, of being cold in the winter because the heat doesn't go all the way upstairs, or different things like that. And I think of the UP very similar, of it really builds resilience and independence and problem solving, because it is smaller communities. You have to rely on each other, and you have to be willing to help each other and be self-sufficient when you're snowed in. Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you mention that, because so my grandparents, when they retired, they had a little hobby farm, and so now you drive about 50 minutes from here north, so you're almost directly in between Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. There really isn't anything, and I think it drives Amy probably kind of nuts at times, where it's like, I got to do this myself, and I'm not giving up until I succeed. And it probably drives her crazy at times. She's like, well, why don't you just have somebody else do this? Or, why don't you just put it aside, and worry about it later? It's like, no, I'm working on this now. So it's funny that you bring that up, because I think it does kind of instill some of that. I grew up in a ranch home, 3-bedroom ranch home. The only heat that we had in the house was the fire, or the wood stove in the living room. And you're right. If you're not working in keeping that fire stoked, guess what? The house gets cold.
Exactly.
So there is a little bit of that, I guess, instilled in you that you don't even realize it when you're growing up. That now it's like, wow, that really instilled some work ethic in you that you didn't even realize was happening.
Mm-hmm. They say you can't go home again, but you guys have literally come home again. And you described owning this place as surreal, but what's it like coming home after living away for so long?
I have to say, it's weird to actually have family be your blood relatives. Our family has always been our neighborhood, our friends, because we had to rely on other people because we've lived away from family for so long. So I'd have to say that's kind of the weirdness of coming back and going, oh yeah, my friends are my true family now. And it's different, it's good, but it's an adjustment, for me at least.
How much do you feel like has changed? Like in Gladstone, for instance, do you feel like there's a lot of changes or not as many as some other places?
I'll jump on that one a little bit, because I would even elaborate a little bit more to what Amy said. We were gone for 22 years. You come back home for Christmas, whatever, holidays, vacation, you see little bits and pieces of it, right? And you spend, at least we'd spend most of our time with family. Now that we're back here permanently, you go to town and it's like, wow, the little town that I grew up in, that I knew everybody in, I couldn't go into the grocery store before without seeing somebody that you knew, right? I mean, you just bumped into people. Now, you go into town, you go, oh, wow, my little town has changed. Back then, everybody did their grocery shopping at Elmer's, county market, right? Yeah. Now we have Walmart, which is a superstore. So you have the grocery department there. You have Meijer, which there's groceries there. I went into Elmer's and I'm like, holy man, this place has really changed. There's barely anybody in here. So some of those big box stores have changed things a little bit in our little community. It's significantly different. And just walking in after being gone for so long, you see some faces that you're like, I know I should know who that is. I recognize them, but you've been gone for so long that, it's kind of unique coming home.
Mm-hmm. Why the transition now? Because how long ago was it that you purchased these cottages?
So we purchased the cottages. We closed. It was March 10th. We took possession May 7th, 2022. We had sold our home in Appleton. We closed on that June 15th, I think it was. We packed up our house on June 10th and came north, and we had our first guests here at the resort June 12th. And June 18th then was the first week of being full, where all 5 cabins were rented. So it was a very fast transition, but for us, the timing of all this was right. So our oldest child, our son, Trey, he was living up here, working here. He was actually living in a house 0.8 of a mile down the highway. Our daughter was going to Northern Michigan University, which is an hour and 20 minutes north. She plays on the women's volleyball team. We were always coming up for games up here. And the timing was just right for us. It's like our children are up here.
And our parents aren't getting any younger.
Right. And that probably played a big factor in it also, right? Our when you're 3 hours away from your parents that are getting up in years and could use a hand with this or need a little bit of help with that. It's just, you're so far away. It's hard to get there on the drop of a hat. Now, we can be there very short notice. So the timing was really right for us.
Have you guys owned small businesses before?
We have not owned small businesses before, but I grew up in small businesses. So up until the time I was 15, my mom and dad had a bar and restaurant. At that time, they sold the bar and restaurant, opened up a fish and seafood market. A few years after that, then also opened up a greenhouse. So I grew up in small family businesses. So even though we haven't owned anything like that in the past, I grew up in that. I now work in sales where I manage a territory. So that business side of things has always been there for me, but not from an ownership perspective.
Not for me.
What were the conversation as a husband and wife that you guys had in preparation for doing this? Because there's a lot of pieces to it. The investment of money, the physically moving piece, and then how we're going to operate this business. Did you guys have a lot of conversations around that? What was that like?
I would say that we didn't have a ton of conversation around that because we had talked about it years ago. And then over the years have said, why didn't we do that? We missed the boat on that. So when it came up this time, we were like, we're not missing it this time. And I, being a teacher, it's been rough the last couple of years with teaching. And I just said, yes. There was not any, reluctancy on my part because I knew I needed to move. I needed a change.
I would say the last 2 years of you being a teacher and being in education had been really difficult and trying, and you needed a break from that. This was it really was kind of a no-brainer for us. Amy could step away from teaching for the time being, whether she chooses to go back to that or not. I mean, that's really up to her. But for the time being, her working here in the resort and me being able to keep my same job because this location is within my territory. So now I'm further away from the majority of my business. However, geographically, I'm more centrally located in my territory than what I was before. How we purchased this was a little bit unique. So we didn't have all of the financial information, what the previous owners had been doing here from a business perspective. So we looked at it going, okay, we know how many cabins there are. We know what the busy season is. We know that these cabins book. So from a financial perspective, it was a little bit going into it a little bit blind, to be truthful with you, but knowing what is here, what has been done in the past, and what we can do by living here and extending that season. So the previous owners viewed this as their summer home. After Labor Day, they would shut the business down and they would winter in Arizona, come back in May, open the cabins back up. Now that we're here and we're living here year round, we're going to extend that season. And hopefully, our intent is to keep 3 cabins open for snowmobilers, for ice fishermen, for people that want to come up here cross-country skiing. We had one potential guest that was asking about, hey, does the lake freeze? Can we ice skate? So some of those things that we can promote more of a year-round vacation destination versus just the summertime with your feet in the sand.
I really love that you brought up the buying this and knowing the financial information, the business information coming in. Now, did you buy this as a business or did you buy it as real estate that you were going to make into a business, if that makes sense? Because obviously it sounds like they weren't selling necessarily all the goodwill that comes with it in the sense of client lists. Were they selling you repeat return customers as well?
Yeah. So when we purchased this, we were provided with their bookings for 2022. And what we learned is there was probably, I'm going to say, close to 12 weeks that they were booked with repeat customers, repeat guests. And what we learned is almost, I would say, the majority are 20 to 30 year repeat customers, that this is their vacation spot. This is what they look forward to the entire year. Going into it, we didn't really know that. but that's what we learned when we got that list of bookings for the upcoming year. It was interesting and kind of fascinating that people just we have 3 generations. They're like, hey, my parents brought me here when I was a kid, and now we're bringing our children. So there's 3 generations that have been coming here for many, many years.
Mm-hmm. What was the biggest hurdle once you got here, you had those first bookings, and you got done one night and sat down together and were like, oof, this is maybe more than what we expected? What aspect was that?
Cleaning cabins on Saturday morning. 5, having a 5-hour turnover and having to be ready for new guests. So checkout time is 10 a.m. and check-in time is 3 p.m. And having just Eric and I at first, cleaning those 5 cabins in 5 hours and not knowing, because I'm not a housekeeper when it comes to, that's not my job necessarily. And we want to do it on our own. We didn't want to hire out right away. So,
Right.
And we do some things that maybe other folks don't do, right? Amy takes the time to understand who's coming here, right? Is it a husband and wife with 2 kids? What are the kids' names? What are the ages? So she puts together a very nice welcome note, right? But then also, if you have, an 8-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, hey, there's a coloring book with crayons. There might be a squirt gun for the boy. There might be, around the 4th of July, you did some
paper plates,
Yeah,
napkins
yeah.
with flags.
And
something, a little touch that we can put our mark on.
Yeah, and some glow sticks for the kids. We weren't doing sparklers, but we're doing some glow sticks and that kind of stuff. So we kind of tried to personalize it there a little bit. So you want that, I guess, that personal touch. You want that cabin to be very clean. The cabins are older cabins, right? But we want to make sure that they're clean, they're to our level of expectation, and turn it over in a timely manner and have them ready. So Saturdays were a little bit stressful.
What are some of the other hurdles as small business owners? Because you mentioned, hey, we had to get in, we had to clean these units. There's also now social media to advertise your business, placing ads if you want to advertise your business, getting that reach out there. So have you guys taken all of that on yourselves and break out that responsibility, or have you brought on anybody, or have we put the kids to work yet?
When the kids were home this summer, yes, sometimes they were available, but a lot of times they're doing, their jobs too, their own things. So we did have them a little bit. We had a friend of Eric's that lives down the road. His young daughter, who is 16, we had her come a couple times and help us just make beds, which alleviated some of that help.
From an advertisement perspective, our daughter, who has never done this before, actually is the one that put together our website.
Okay.
So it was a learning experience for her, and she's done that, and I think she did a phenomenal job.
And then took over the Instagram. So she's marketed it on Instagram. And
So from a marketing perspective, one thing that Amy spends a lot of time with is kind of some of the Facebook groups. Hey, Upper Peninsula cabins. Hey, I'm looking for a cabin somewhere around here. So those are the things that she can respond to, and not spend a ton of time and spend no money on advertisement and still be able to get your name out there. That's one thing that the internet does a phenomenal job with, right? In the past, it was word of mouth. It was somebody drove by and saw the sign, yellow pages, or they really, your guests had to work harder to seek you out. Now you can plug in on the internet and go, all right, cabins near Escanaba, if you want to go to that area. So I think from a marketing perspective, really the internet is what we've chosen because that is what everybody uses.
What advice would you give to others that are looking to get into rental units, Airbnb, something that's similar to this?
Oof. So currently, that is something that we're going through right now because we were handed a full season, right? Completely booked up. We chose to only do bookings directly through us. Now that we're in the off season, that's the route we're going through. We want to get everything on Airbnb. We are going to honor all of our guests' bookings from year to year. So we'll block out those weeks on Airbnb. But the marketing aspect of Airbnb is really what interests us. I would say for somebody that's going to get into it, depending on the situation, if you're going to buy a rental property and focus on short-term rentals, I would say you have to get that on Airbnb right away. Unlike with us, even though it's short-term rentals, we were handed a full season where we didn't have any cabins available. So that was built in for us. So the online, booking is huge. I think, with Airbnb, I think that's opened up, a world of opportunity for folks and for us being right on the water, that's a huge thing, right? People want to come and spend time on the water. So from a rental property perspective, I think you can almost be anywhere and do that now just because of the internet. But for us, location is everything.
I would have to add to that, though. I think having the one-on-one conversations, the emails back and forth, we're building relationships that these people keep coming back because of that, because we're here to talk to them, because we're here to go sit out at the campfire with them at night. And I think with Airbnb, sometimes if you're doing it on that or VRBO or whatever, you don't have that necessarily. So those people are there for 1 week, 1 year, but then you might not get those customers back for 10 or never again, where we're seeing the difference of it's a mom and pop situation here. We're on the grounds. We can have that conversation, learn about each customer that comes in here. For instance, we found out on Labor Day weekend, they asked, where are all our mismatched mugs? We look forward to that. And I'm like, oh, that's me. I took them all out because I'm all about matching. Well, guess what I did? I wrote down in our books for next year when they come back, I'm putting a ton of mismatched mugs in their cabin. So just building that relationship and taking those notes on the guests that come in to make it special for them during the week. Because some of them have said this is their favorite time of the year, is the week they spend at Fishery Pointe Cottages. Or they're taking pictures down there and it's the picture on their Christmas card every year. So to keep getting those people back is super important to me. Yeah. So I feel like if you're going to do a rental, in my personal experience, I think that one-on-one relationship building is huge.
I think Amy has a great point there.
Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to ask, Amy, you were talking about leaving education and feeling the need to do that. Can you tell us a little bit about why you were at a point where you're like, I need to break away and change careers or do something for myself?
I would say over the last 2 years, really, it has, with the COVID and everything, it has just changed education drastically. And I feel like the social issues and the political issues that are seeping into our public education, I want it out. I wanted to be that caregiver to the kids and teaching math and reading and science and not bringing all the social issues in. I feel that was not the place to do it. So I was really getting down on that. And I felt like I emotionally wasn't into it like I used to be. So I just needed an emotional break, I guess, to recharge. And this was the place to do it. And I've always wanted to live on a lake. And I thought, what a better way than to have a business and be able to live on the lake.
Yeah.
So
one question I love to ask, because I think it's very revealing in a positive way, is what was the last meaningful conversation each of you would say you had, and why was it meaningful to you?
I would have to say, for me, our neighbor next door was losing her husband. And being able to be there with her and even just to sit quietly and not say a word, having conversation by being quiet, by hugging, by having your hand on her hand when she was sobbing, those are important to me.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah.
And I don't know.
You bring that up, and not to get too deep, I guess. Being here for her is extremely important for us. I've known them all my life. And just to be here when they're going through that time and John passing, we just feel like we were meant to be here. No other way to put it. We were meant to be here. We're meant to be here to be here to support Irene as she goes through this very, very tough time in her life. You know, Amy brings up those conversations, and for me, I would say one that kind of sticks out is I have a friend that was diagnosed with brain cancer and was given a very short time to live when he first was diagnosed, and Amy and I stopped there 2 weeks ago, and we had just an amazing conversation where he was given some hope, and to see that in his eyes, and it gives me goosebumps to go from you have a very short period of time to live to having brain surgery, removing most of the tumor, but the type of tumor it is, they can't get it all. So going through the radiation and chemotherapy and all that to now, kind of, what is it now, 7 months later, going, okay, the mass has actually shrunken a little bit. Having a consultation with a neurological oncologist from Mayo Clinic and said that he asked the question, what do you guys want from me? And their response was, we'd like to have something proactive. We don't want to just wait. We want to try to be proactive about this. And he's like, great. Well, I've reviewed all of your information, right? Your medical history here and what's been going on. I have a colleague that is doing surgeries on this type of tumor. I want to put you in touch with him. I didn't know if that was prior to this conversation. Right? I didn't know if this was going to be one of the last conversations I've ever had with him. And I felt that we went out of our way because I'm like, I want to see him again. I want to talk to him again. I don't want to have something happen to him and regret not stopping today and taking that time out of our busy schedule to just be a good friend and stop in and touch base. And when we learned that outlook has changed a little bit and they have potentially a positive path forward, and just to see how that has changed and given some hope, that was pretty impactful to me and meaningful. It seems as though, I don't know if as we get older, we're just touched by that because of age, but it seems like lately there's been more and more of that around us, and just to take that extra time and have a good sit down and talk with folks. We all have busy schedules, but I think we gotta, I guess, hit that pause button and take the time to, hey, those other things can wait. This is more important. And I think that was probably my most recent one that I can think of, at least.
And I just think a conversation of hope for everyone, and especially in today's world. I think, if we can bring hope and positivity through conversation with strangers that we meet on the streets, and like you said, the meaningfulness of it, getting to know each other. I feel like that's kind of a lost thing lately, as you talk to people that don't even know their neighbors sometimes, and that just blows me away. We came from a neighborhood that we knew all our neighbors. They spent time at our house. That's, I guess, who we are. And so to own something like this was easy because we knew we were people who can, have conversations with anyone. Eric more so than me, but and just bringing that conversation of hope to anyone nowadays. I feel like people seem like they're down. Things are happening around them, and just being able to have hope and give hope.
That's such an important statement, because there are a lot of conversations happening, but they either come with a heaviness or a negativeness or a victimhood. And on the flip side of that, and again, that's kind of the point of this podcast, is there's going to be hard conversations in there for sure. And, leave it to family to bring tears up at the first podcast, the first time that's happened. But that's great. But that's great because it's still a conversation of hope
Right.
and friendship and what can happen when you have those conversations.
Right.
I feel if you take the time to get to know people, there's a lot more commonality than what people realize. And I may not be a soccer coach, but I have coached volleyball, and there's some commonality there, right? We can talk about that. There's just, I think if you're willing to take the time and get to know people a little bit and ask those questions, not necessarily what can I get out of the conversation, but just to understand what are your likes, what are you're gonna find commonality with almost everybody, if you're willing to take the time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting.
It's taking that time. That's it. I had Red Clay Soap on the podcast, and Farmer John, said you got to look at yourself if you're someone who's shying away from asking someone how they are. What does that mean for you, not for them? How do you break through that fear? And that's kind of like you said, there's more commonality than what you think. But if you don't ask the question or you don't start the conversation, you're never going to know that. And you're just going to have the fear of we're too different to have a conversation. So for the last question today, guys, I wanted to ask you each individually, if you could have a conversation and sit down with someone one-on-one, living or dead, who would you want to sit down and have a conversation with?
You can go first, babe.
Okay.
Would you like?
I always say Martin Luther King Jr. And I've said that, in high school, in grade school, when they ask that same question, I've always said that. And I'd have to continue with that just because I see what's going on in our world today. And I wonder, does he, is he okay with it? Is he not okay with it? Does he see those differences that people are bringing out right now? Or does he see that we've come a long way? I don't know. I just think he's an amazing person that did an amazing thing for our country. And he's somebody that I look up to.
All right, so I'm going to make a longer answer to that question than what it needs to be. You asked that, and there were a couple of things that kind of came to mind. I felt that I had, one of my grandfathers was an amazing guy, and I got to listen and hear a lot of stories towards their later years. And we got to have those conversations, and I got to learn a lot about his upbringing and where he came from and how he ended up where he was, right? So that would be one person that, I'd love to hear more stories. But really the one that comes to mind, I kind of get choked up here a little bit, but so growing up in Ford River, it's very small rural area, and a friend of mine that I went to elementary school with, middle school, high school, grew up just down the road, and on his 27th birthday was killed in a car wreck. I think it'd be cool, to have that conversation today, just on be able to share my life, our marriage, our kids, our family. I think that would be cool, because that was so unexpected that you didn't see it coming, so we didn't have the conversations as frequently. He was living down in Lower Michigan at the time, so not that we ever left anything unsaid or anything like that, but just to be able to share that, because my kids, if he was alive today, my kids would know him very well. Our children know about him, but didn't get to know him. So that would be one. That would be one that I think I'd love to have that conversation.
Wow, well, you guys really brought the opinions today. Thank you so much for being so open and honest and sharing something straight from your heart. I think that's so important to see men share things like that.
Yeah, I always say you can probably slap me upside the head with a 2x4 and I'd shake that off and not shed any tears. Yeah. But I guess I've always kind of worn my emotions on my sleeve, and not been bashful about that. And that's that story. Yeah, I think about them a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time out today to come on the podcast and tell us about your business and really share some things straight from your heart. I know it's going to mean a lot to our listeners. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
No,
You're welcome.
we love
Thanks for
seeing
having
you.
us.
And if you get the opportunity, go to fisherypointecottages.com and check us out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Amy and Eric for joining us on Conversation Mill. If you're interested in learning more about Fishery Pointe Cottages or booking a stay there, you can visit their website. That's down in the show notes. You can also follow them on Instagram at Fishery Pointe Cottages. Thank you for being a listener of Conversation Mill. The podcast is growing, but we need your continued support in the form of comments, likes, and subscriptions. If you've enjoyed even one episode, please take 2 minutes to comment under the episode or the podcast itself, or rate the podcast. Hitting the subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast helps tremendously. Every like and subscribe helps me support local businesses and local nonprofits by giving them a platform to tell their stories. Together, we can foster the understanding, diversity, and economies that make our individual communities flourish, while creating our own community here at Conversation Mill. Also, you can join us at conversationmill.substack.com, where you can become a member and receive weekly member-only content, including member-only episodes. I look forward to sharing a new conversation with you next week, and as always, thank you for your support.